Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel's Reverse Flash God. Chapter 1. My name is Runersh. I was employed by Stark Industries. Due to an experimental accident, I gained superhuman speed and strength. But because of this, I lost the love of my life. 6 months ago. Freya, adjust the input voltage parameters and record a new set of data. Facing the experimental records in his hands, Jung was putting all his attention into the experimental process of developing Stark's new weapon products. On the side, Ms. Freya, who serves as Jaeon's fiancée and work assistant, is also performing the duties of an assistant. The experiment is ready, the parameters have been adjusted, the data feedback is stable, and recording can begin. Faced with the unknown chemical substances glowing with various colors on the experimental table, he reported the experimental process truthfully. Everything is ready, all procedures have been checked, and the experiment has entered a critical stage. The debugging of the power part is completed and the experimental results can be obtained only after the neutralization of key chemical substances. However, Anger's gaze passed over Freya's profile. This start may mean the future of this couple. The successful development of new weapons and equipment will bring huge benefits to Angers, which will improve the status of the lovers among Stark Enterprises R&D workers. The future is bright, but they have a very irresponsible boss. The 11th floor underground of Stark Industries, in Tony Stark's private laboratory. Jarvis, the experimental record begins now, codenamed LH-107 Experiment Report. Record the failure process, and remember to remind me in the memo to add excess palladium to neutralize the energy reaction of the fusion process before starting the next experiment. Tanistic A was currently sitting slumped in a pile of abandoned reaction devices. Because the high temperature caused by the failure of the previous experimental process destroyed all the equipment in the entire basement. Fortunately, Stark did not stay in the reaction laboratory in person. After the failure, he came to the basement to summarize the failure process and make plans for the next time. Preparation of experimental conduct memo. Tony Stark's voice message was collected, and the virtual projection of the strong artificial intelligence Jarvis flashed on Tony Stark's watch. Okay boss, the memo has been uploaded, do you want to start the next experiment? There is a hint of humanity in the mechanized voice. This is the exclusive characteristic of Jarvis, a miraculous intelligent creature. As the housekeeper and experimental assistant, Jarvis insists on performing himself. Responsibilities and functions. Stark looked back at the ruined underground laboratory. He didn't see any possibility of continuing the experiment, and Playboy didn't seem to want to do anything that would make him unhappy. Jingle bell. At the same time, a communication bell that should not have appeared in this closed underground laboratory rang, a communication prompt from the strong artificial intelligence Jarvis. The call came from a message source that has been encrypted and forced to track the source. The target is Major Ronnie. Jarvis's mechanical sound echoed in the laboratory. At first, Tony Stark felt a little confused about who would be looking for him at such a time, and had the source of the signal that Jarvis needed to track, but after hearing the target lock, identity, Ronnie Stark was relieved. Okay Jarvis, hang up the phone for me and give Ronaldinho a reply. Hello Ronnie, I'm sorry for not answering your call. I'm doing some indescribable things right now. Maybe next time I'll use Playboy. Cover girl is here to make up for the loss caused by this call. Finally, I didn't forget about tonight's party. You don't need a phone call to remind your best friend of the party. The above is the entire content of the reply. Complete. After hanging up the communication, Tony stood up from the pile of debris in the laboratory. Jarvis, record the video of this experiment and wait until I come back to consider whether to continue. Also, give me the power consumption record of this experiment, and remember to remind me not to make similar mistakes next time. Finally, notify the service robot come down and clean up the experimental garbage. If everything is not taken care of before I come back, I will tear it down and donate it to MIT. Good boss. Shaking a bunch of unruly hair on his head, Tony Stark was still the wandering playboy, as if he was not affected by the failure of the experiment at all. He stood up and left, no longer caring about all the ruins behind him, and calmly treated Javi C. gave all the instructions. The confident figure fades away in the underground laboratory. As everyone knows, Tony, who has experienced countless failures in a cold fusion miniaturization experiment that started many years ago, made a mistake this time. The failure of the experiment is not terrible. The loss of electrical energy is nothing to Stark Enterprises. Countless failed experiments over the years have made Tony Stark accustomed to the compensation afterwards. The high-energy experimental process means huge electrical energy consumption. In addition to the economic consumption, more comes from the instantaneous power outage that lasts for tens of seconds across New York City. Although this is not fatal, and it will not bring any consequences with the strong economic support of Stark Industries, what a big impact, but this time is an exception. Jaeon and his lover Freya, who are conducting the final process of chemical thermal weapons experiments in the laboratory of Stark Enterprises' Weapons Research and Development Department, have reached the most critical moment. As the turbid liquids of different colors in the test tube flow into the mixing device, the external input device is turned on. Driven by the electric part, the mixing device begins to operate. The experimental temperature begins to rise, the chemical reaction is ongoing, and the strong pressure device is also sync is on. The power system is stable, the room temperature is stable, the humidity is stable, the pressure device is started, and the steady increase in pressure begins. Jaeon recorded the experiment on the experimental video, and the experimental assistant Freya who received the instructions was also performing all the operations at hand simultaneously. The mixing of chemicals produces huge energy, and the high temperature is concentrated in a small experimental device under strong pressure and cannot be released. This is exactly the environment and perfect experimental process required for this weapon. Waves of white mist sprayed out from the narrow exhaust port, and the device that stabilized the internal and external pressure was adjusting everything in it to ensure that there would be no explosion after the experiment. Successful. Jung looked excitedly at the laboratory outside the glass window. From the data fed back by Freya on the electronic display, it seemed that the experiment was about to succeed. Victory was right in front of their eyes. But all accidents will happen in the next moment. Ding. Dark. An instant blackout began, an unwarranted blackout. The entire Stark Industries building was paralyzed at this moment. The whole of New York fell into a brief darkness. The whole city lost the support of electricity. It was getting dark. But for Jean and Freya in the laboratory, it is not just a simple darkness. Shut it down immediately, is not finished yet. There was a sudden power outage, and the entire laboratory lost its light in the blink of an eye. A bad premonition arose in Riang's heart. He didn't even have time to think about how to deal with this problem, and he didn't even have time to press the emergency stop button with his hand. The bad news has come. Boom. Just 1 second after the darkness, a huge bright light lit up the entire laboratory. Under the stimulation of unsaturated electrical energy, the high-energy compounds that had not yet been mixed produced a huge reaction unprecedented in the history of chemistry. The unknown powerful energy wave washed away the test bench, and the light lit up everything in the darkness. Jung didn't know what he had experienced in this brief moment, the big leap from heaven to hell, the joy of success 1 second ago but now the despair of doom. In the brief moment when the brain slowed down its reaction speed, and in the moment before the consciousness was impacted by this unknown force, he saw the figure of his beloved out of the corner of his eye. The call, Freya, maybe the farewell. Riang felt a wave of heat rush into his body, as if he saw the flashing arc of thunder flashing through his mind, but the next moment he was in darkness again. The last scene was Freya turning into a point of light and disappearing in front of the electronic monitor. In the empty laboratory, only an engagement ring that was turned into small pieces of burnt black was left, and Jean Flash, who was lying unconscious in a pool of blood. My name is Ange Flash. 6 months ago, I was a researcher employed by Stark Industries to develop an experiment with chemical thermal weapons. However, I lost my beloved because of an experimental accident, and since then he fell into a coma that lasted 3 months. And when I woke up, I discovered that I had gained superpowers. Now, I am Jean Flash, Ash. Boom. The sound of rapid running with strong wind howling in your ears. On the crossroads of the main thoroughfare of Times Square in the heart of New York City, a golden light is running very fast. You can vaguely see the blurry figures inside. Maybe they will stop and pass by passers-by by chance, or they may be passing by on the street. The Mexican tacos that were taken away from the street vendor always left behind a dollar bill, leaving traces of it or his presence. It has come and existed, but no one can take a direct look at his appearance. Those who have seen it only know that it belongs to the Night Runner that has appeared in the center of New York recently. People who are not familiar with him may think that this is another superhero who appears in people's lives after Iron Man Tony Stark. But only people who have experienced life in New York in the past 3 months will understand that this is just an insignificant scenery, leaving no traces, just like a flash of light that is fleeting, will not stop for anyone, and will not leave any traces. He is such a cautious person that no fingerprints or marks are left on the banknotes. Jaeon has never been a passionate man. Jaeon, who is engaged in a second-line job in science, doesn't even like to show his face in front of others. Jaeon, who graduated from MIT with a PhD in electrical engineering and a graduate degree in thermal stress, is just a rather boring person, silent guy. If it weren't for a confidant, a lover who understood and supported him well, but now, there is nothing. Freya disappeared without any reason, and there was no trace of her existence, as if she had evaporated from the world. No one could answer what happened in the laboratory that night, and the period after the power system lost its function. Over time, all city surveillance equipment has lost its due capabilities, all regulatory facilities have become blind, and all sound control equipment has become deaf. And the terrible things that happened during this period, by the Stark Military-Industrial Group, maybe it can no longer be called this. 2 months ago, the man who was called the Playboy Tony Stark, the Stark Corporation military factory has been closed and it should now be called Stark Energy Corporation. After that incident, the Stark Group immediately erased all traces of negative impact, and was officially interpreted as an energy leakage incident caused by a weapon explosion. Although secret investigations from all aspects still existed at that time, it was obviously the final verdict has been made. In the early days after Jean regained consciousness, there were constant inquiries from various national organizations and investigations from various departments whose names he had never heard of before, but Jean concealed everything. Because of the explosion, my brain was shocked and I couldn't recall anything or any details during that period. Holding the examination report on the back of the hospital examination, Jung stopped all investigators and Freya disappeared. It was a huge blow to Riang, and he didn't want to face more things that would distract him. Perhaps most departments and organizations of the domestic government would be deterred by this inspection report, but 2 departments and a hidden organization still approached him. "This is my business card. If you have any ideas or think of anything, you can use this to contact us." The visitor did not leave the name of the department or organization, but judging from the fact that they were able to bypass the inspection department and find Jaeon directly, these people may be agents or other. John Gartler. Angers quietly put the other party's business card into his pocket. He didn't know what the name meant, but at that time, Angers wanted to calm down. Now, running on the main street in the heart of New York City, Jaeon has put aside everything in his heart, running with all his strength. Real-time monitoring record turned on, body condition scan. Wearing a bright yellow one-piece leather jacket, Riang is scanning and monitoring various body data while running through the voice-activated intelligence system built into the Red Lightning logo on his chest to achieve accurate monitoring. To assist in the use of one's own superpowers. Dillilili, da da da. A series of continuous symbols and numbers appeared in the red lenses on Zhang's headgear. The data representing various body values in his own motion state positively reflected Zhang's ability and his own super ability while running at full strength. The level of ability. A not-so-simple intelligent control system is installed in a one-piece leather suit. This is the last thing that Jean obtained before leaving Stark Enterprises. It is a special product from the Stark Group's laboratory, until it was only after the dress was completed that Jean decided to resign from Stark Enterprises completely. Although Tony Stark's symbolic retention and expression of regret that he could not continue to work together before his departure were regrettable, it only made Angers feel more disgusted by the behavior of this playboy who was crowned on the surface and hypocritical on the inside. The Stark Group didn't leave much to Jaeon. Apart from nightmare memories, it only had a large severance package. Although the research management department tried to retain him, Jaeon rejected it. The longed for future and Freya came here, but now, Freya has gone, and it's time for Riang to leave too. 3 months. A set of leather jackets and a complete set of smart devices cost Angers almost all of his savings. The extra spare money was invested in the stocks of another rising company in New York City, Austrian Capital Group. After Angers resigned, Austrian Capital Group euphemistically sold it. Offering an olive branch, he is willing to recruit Angers, an outstanding researcher. But he was rejected by Angers. It wasn't that Angers didn't want to get a satisfying job again, but everything that happened to him was so incredible that Angers couldn't believe anyone. Hurry up, the current speed is not enough. Jung is focused on running, not running for any purpose. Jung just hopes that he can go faster, faster. The destruction of a nuclear storm not only gave Angers pain, but also gave him new powers and hidden dangers. The lightning speed is daunting, but at the same time, it also brings great pain because of this power. Angers cannot keep himself still. He must run hard from the moment the lightning energy is refreshed at midnight every day. The huge lightning energy storage gives his almost immortal body and never-fatiguing drive. Anjay is now like a perpetual motion machine with an energy source that creates something out of nothing. Its energy is enough to shock the world. However, as the person involved, he may not want this. Run. The dazzling lightning all over his body and the built-in hooks of gold and titanium alloy under his feet allowed him to ignore the influence of most of the friction under his feet as he moved forward rapidly. The bright yellow leather jacket with aerodynamic patterns perfectly accelerated and recorded what was happening in his body. All data changes. Increasing speed means consuming more and more power, and Angers needs to keep himself faster in order to get more rest time. Eternal Speedster sounds wonderful, but also painful. You can run, Zhang. Zhang's fanatical eyes revealed hatred, as if everything in front of him was a passing cloud, an obstacle that stood in the way of revenge between him and Tony Stark. Boom. At this moment, the super speed that is unexplainable on the physical level is no less than a still moment for ordinary people, but on Jaeon's timeline, he has already run a full kilometer. 1 kilometer per second, breaking the sound barrier at supersonic speed. Zzz. Suburb. There was a terrifying screeching sound that made people feel numb. A whole black and terrifying trace was wiped out on the asphalt road, and at the same time, a bright yellow figure arrived. The light is fleeting. The maximum speed is 1120 kilometers per hour. He took off his hood, revealing his head covered with sweat. His body gradually became tired and felt emptiness and hunger. This belated feeling finally made Angers feel that he was still like a living person. But the time now is only 3 hours before midnight, and there is not much time left for him to rest. Then I hope it will be faster tomorrow. Real-time monitoring, scanning the surrounding environment, and using the number 1 network route to analyze the return route to ensure that no one can find my traces. Riang put on the hood again. According to the rigor of the scientist, Riang needed a safe route back. Scientists like to study others, but Jaeon, who was once a member of the scientists, did not like to be studied by others. During the safe route analysis, everything was detected as normal, the route was calibrated, and it was confirmed. Then, do it again. Half crouching on the grass in the suburbs, on the route near the river embankment, his passionate eyes were shining with golden light, and his half-crouching posture was ready for another sprint. However, just when Jean was about to start running, on the twisted route in the suburbs, on the route near the water in the distance, an accident occurred to a high-speed sports car. Save people or just watch. My name is Stephen Strange, a neurosurgeon from New York, and I am confident that because I have extraordinary medical skills and surgical experience, it will bring me everything I want. And now, I am driving my car and being invited to the Stark Group New York Expo. If I am lucky enough to meet Iron Man himself, Tony Stark. On the outskirts of New York City, on the Riverside Road, a Maybach was running at a speed of more than 120 miles. The lights in the car were flashing and rhythmic music was playing. The speed exceeding the road speed limit made people feel dizzy and excited. Stephen Strange was in this car, and was invited by the Stark Group to participate in the Group Expo because of his superb medical abilities. At this moment, Strange was a little carried away. Due to his excessive arrogance and self-confidence, Strange has developed an arrogant character, and this invitation has further intensified this characteristic. Ignoring the speed regulations for driving on this stretch of road, Strange stepped on the accelerator to the bottom, just to enjoy the pleasure and wildness brought by this speed. A strange scream of, "Aha!" was accompanied by the explosive roar of the Maybach engine. Strange let go of the steering wheel and stretched his hand out of the window. Ding ding ding, a strange call appeared on Strange's cell phone. Strange, who never accepts any surgery request from any medical insurance patient, doesn't understand why there are unknown calls on his mobile phone, especially a number that is similar to an irregular number. You must know that people among the upper class of New York have special numbers. Not a few. But the young doctor still decided to answer the call. Maybe he just made the wrong call. Hello. Strange stretched out his hand and tapped the screen of his mobile phone, which was placed in the small storage compartment in front of the car. He said a cordial greeting and looked at the number and location prompts on the display. However, all accidents happened in the next moment. Strange, who was supposed to be holding the steering wheel with both hands, had completely let go of his hands, and his eyes that were supposed to be looking at the road ahead were briefly diverted to his mobile phone at this moment. A speed of up to 120 miles, a sports car running along the river road, bad weather, a winding road, a dark night sky, all reasonable factors constituted an inevitable coincidence. Gee, 1 second, everything happens in just one brief second. Although Strange had already reacted and started to turn the steering wheel to avoid the curved road ahead, even though the Maybach's emergency braking system was excellent. But something unfortunate still happened, caused by a strange call. In the distance, through the light projected by the vehicle, Riang saw a car accident in the distance. The flying sports car was thrown off the road by the centripetal force generated by its own rotation and fell directly under the river embankment. There are so many misfortunes in the night, do we need to save? A question that was not difficult to choose flashed through Riang's mind. To save or not to save was just a matter of thought. Boom, but before thinking about it, Jean still had plenty of time. The moment compared to a normal person was still very long for Jean. At least the few seconds of Maybach floating in the air and rolling were enough for Jean to do a lot of things. Golden lightning instantly gathered outside Jaeon's leather armor and turned into a flowing shadow, rushing towards the target with a comet-like trail. First second, the Maybach floated into the air and began to fall into the river embankment. The huge impact caused by the collision with the guardrail shattered the glass of the Maybach's side body. At the same moment, Jean transformed into lightning and entered the Maybach. The relative slowdown and the difference in time passage allowed Jean to do a lot in a short second. Although the glass flying in the air was still moving, it was so slow in Jean's eyes. The reality inside the almost stationary car was revealed one by one in Jean's eyes. Second, the Maybach was completely thrown into the river embankment. The impact of the fall knocked Strange forward in the car. Due to the huge force and the glass shards floating in the air, the airbag protection that had just been deployed was destroyed by countless glass shards. Punctured by slag. Strange's hands instinctively moved forward to defend himself in order to protect his body from harm. Strange's hands were penetrated by glass shards, and countless fragments were like countless blades, cruelly killing Strange's deft hands. Divided into countless pieces of flesh. However, the stinging pain has not yet been reflected from the brain circuit back to the body, but emergency actions will make things worse. Because of his subconscious defensive reaction, Strange missed the best time to unbuckle his seat belt. His hands were severely injured by the broken glass, and even though they could still be used afterwards, they were completely disabled. At this moment, Strange felt crisis, he couldn't leave his seat. However, at the same time, in the passenger seat of the Maybach, Jean gently opened the debris that was closer to him with his fingers. The lightning man, who was wrapped in golden lightning, was slowly looking at everything in the car. A second to others is indeed a long time to the current Jaeon. Jaeon, who has reached a speed almost 45 times that of a normal person, does not have to worry about the lack of time and slowly searches for what he is interested in the Maybach. He is not so kind to saving an outsider who has nothing to do with him. Work ID. Stephen Strange seems to have heard this name somewhere. Look at my memory, New York Medical Light, isn't this a rising star in surgery? Looking at Strange's hospital ID card taken out from the front compartment of the car, Jean said slowly, I recalled whether I had heard of this guy's name. Fortunately, Jean listened. Unfortunately, Jean did not want to save him. A person without mercy is not worthy of being saved. From the few words in his past memory, Jung recalled the evaluation of this master surgeon by social reports. This is an indifferent man with superb skills, a man who never treats those who a stingy person who saves patients who should be saved. However, just when Jean was about to make up his mind and decide to rescue Strange, in a flash of peripheral vision, Jean saw the other party, and in the short 001 seconds of Strange's life, He also saw the leather-clad man with golden lightning flashing in his eyes. "Save me!" Strange yelled hoarsely. Perhaps the debris unfortunately pierced his throat. Perhaps it did not puncture the aorta and cause massive bleeding, but it was inevitable that the standard of pronunciation would be affected. Jean looked at the guy in front of him with great interest and looked at the slowly falling scenery outside the car window. Jean knew that he still had plenty of time, but for Strange, these hours were fatal. "Let me think about it. What is the greatest punishment for a person?" He thought this, not to express his indifferent sense of justice, but because he did not want to let an indifferent doctor be saved so easily. Hot Eyes saw other places, a pair of hands. A pair of hands that should have been dexterous and skillful medical staff, but now, they were filled with blood, minced meat, and the connection between tendons and bones, pale bones dripping with blood. Tisk, 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 it's too miserable, brother, your hands are useless, did you know? Riang came to Strange, who was almost motionless to him, lightly tapped the other's hands, and then looked at his own hands. "It looks like you won't be able to save people anymore." "Save me," may have heard the ridicule from the same indifferent people, or maybe he didn't. As time gradually passed, Strange began to believe in his mind that the figure with golden lightning flashing in front of him was not an illusion. This was a real person. As if grasping the last life-saving straw, Strange did not want to die, but his body tied to the safety seat could not break free from the restraints of the seat belt. As the Maibach gradually fell into the river, Strange don't want to die yet. Boom. Golden lightning once again blooms on the main streets of New York City. What was different from the past was that this time his master did not run according to the originally planned route, which also meant that his traces were captured. Thousands of meters above the ground, in the sky, inside an extremely huge aircraft carrier, at a key position in the ship's control room, a one-eyed black man wearing a dark red windbreaker looked at the file report that had just been transmitted in his hand. "The Golden Lightning Man appears again, find him immediately." Nick Fury gave this order to his most loyal subordinate. Phil Coulson, who was wearing a well-matched suit and neatly styled hair, was as polite as a gentleman and bowed to leave, taking his mission with him and moving forward. "My name is Jean Flash. I was a weapons developer employed by Stark Industries 6 months ago. Because of some accidents during experimental research and development, I lost my true love, but I also gained some extraordinary abilities. At present, I am looking for the meaning of my life by exercising my superpowers. Perhaps in the next time, I will consider looking for my lost love, but before that, I still need to solve the immediate troubles." "Who are you?" The hospital security guard with a pistol in his hand pointed his gun at the sudden arrival. A hooded man in a yellow leather jacket with a bright red lightning bolt logo on his chest. To New Yorkers who have followed the New York Times in recent months, the identity of the person is self-evident, but no matter what, the security question in the current situation still remains. Must have. What's more, the other party is holding a seriously injured patient in his arms. "Raise your hands, put your hands on your head and squat on the ground. Don't let me say it a second time and put down the hostage in your arms." The security guard shouted nervously, trying to use his voice to motivate himself when facing the other party. "Not to fear. It's really because this flashing speed is too surprising for anyone." In addition, after following his original intention and doing something that he would not regret, Angers suddenly felt that it might be more appropriate to ignore Stephen Strange before FC has been exposed. Angers could understand the other party's nervousness, but he didn't like the feeling of having a gun pointed at his head, especially just a few minutes ago. This guy was still choosing the safest route to return to his own home. Inside the safe house. Now Angers regrets it. "I say it for the last time, hold your head with both hands and squat down to put down the hostage, otherwise I will shoot." The security guard tightened his grip on the pistol that was almost slowly trembling in his hand, changing from one hand to two hands, and drops of cold sweat followed the heat. The dialogue dropped from the forehead. Ta ta ta. During this unnecessary blank period of time during the stalemate, heavy firepower security personnel came to support after being alerted by the alarm in the hospital. A group of security units wearing body armor, fully equipped and equipped with shotguns and other powerful weapons have arrived at the scene. The chain effect of a misunderstanding is that the person involved, Jung, was surrounded by this group of security personnel. Riang stopped talking and glanced at everyone around him with indifferent eyes. He no longer explained or even ignored the fact that a few onlookers who were not afraid of death took their own video with their mobile phones. The reasonable security guard was annoyed. "Put down the hostages or we'll shoot." The security guard, who initially had a stalemate with Riang, seemed to be inspired by his supporting companions. He pointed the muzzle of his gun at the opponent's head and gestured to him again. However, boom! The roar of lightning resounded in the hospital, and the strong wind brought by the close range and ultra-high-speed movement swept up countless paper documents. At the same time, it was accompanied by the bombardment of firearms fired by the security personnel at the next moment. Bang bang. Da 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 da. To others, it was just something that happened in an instant, the lightning that broke out one moment, and the sound of gunshots that followed the next moment. The onlookers, who had been educated on the threat of thermal weapons since childhood, subconsciously wanted to flee for safety with their heads in their hands. Before taking shelter. The roar of firearms has ended. No one could see clearly what happened in this second, until the man in yellow leather disappeared in front of them, and several security personnel fell to the ground. Countless disassembled and broken firearms were scattered all over the scene, and countless metal parts were scattered all over the scene. There was a slight heat rising from the top, which all showed what kind of things they had experienced in just a moment. At the scene, an injured patient was placed in a pool of blood waiting for treatment, but it was not until a long time later that others truly understood that it was all over. Immediately seal off the scene, and the first team brings back all relevant personnel involved in the incident for processing. The second team retrieves the hospital's video records and destroys the originals after copying them. The third team processes previous information about this incident from the internet. At the end of the video footage of the emergency, a team of people were left to wait for the doctor to recover and conduct a transcript investigation on the other party. Phil Coulson's special agent team, which arrived slowly afterwards, came to the scene with tasks and missions. Although the target had left a step later, it still left a lot of traces of the incident. This visit was not considered a failure. As long as it left traces, you can follow the clues to find the other party's traces. Coulson, who has been on the battlefield for a long time, understands what the director needs. As a level 6 field agent, Coulson is proficient in psychological analysis of incident tasks. All he has to do is to investigate the cause and results of the emergency and draw conclusions and countermeasures. Analyze the personality of the other party's behavior to determine the level of harm to the other party and finally report it. This is the workflow, simple yet complex, but Coulson is used to it. Shish, it seems you are no longer mysterious. Coulson knew the strange whereabouts of the super-powered person called Lightning who suddenly appeared a month ago. Although he did not have any negative impact on society, the other party came the ghostly speed of disappearing without a trace, the unpredictable method of never leaving traces on network surveillance, and at the same time, he also possesses superpowers unknown to himself and others. But from now on, there is a breakthrough, and the day when the mystery of the other party is revealed may not be far away. Coulson showed a confident smile on his smiling face. He stood up from a squatting position and buttoned the suit buttons on his coat. His polite appearance made people believe that he was a gentleman rather than an agent, but the fact was that is completely opposite. The order to stop the team was finally given, and Coulson knew that he should be busy. Inside the dark sewer basement of Hell's Kitchen, New York City. The dirty underground water drips with a putrid smell, and occasionally there are annoying creatures such as rats, cockroaches, or lizards and spiders coming and going. However, in an environment that is completely inconsistent with this, clean and beautiful scientific research instruments are displayed on one side. In some spotless sewer corner that has been cleaned. This place seems to be blocked by a mysterious repulsive force, which is vastly different from the outside environment. However, this is Riang's safe house, and it is also the only place where he can close his eyes safely and wait for pain and memories. Riang took off his hood, leaned on the sofa and enjoyed the short rest after work. He half squinted his eyes and retrieved the data generated while running tonight. At the same time, he took off the lightning logo on the leather jacket and hung it in a groove on the wall of this room. Click. With a mosaic sound, the lightning logo was emptied of energy storage. The chemical energy and electrical energy generated by the lightning stance when running at full speed perfectly supplemented the energy consumption in this area, and for everything it created. Jung, who has become accustomed to the environment, is now focusing his attention on the development of the next experiment. The two-tank liquid flask device contains an unknown liquid, a familiar research process and experimental device. The 31st blackout experiment starts now. This is the thing that Riang has put the most effort into in addition to strengthening his superpowers, and it is also the thing that he attaches most importance to at the moment. Repeat the blackout incident that night. Repeat that accident. My name is Jean Fleisch, and I was working in the Weapons Research and Development Department of Stark Industries 4 months ago. However, an accident caused by an experimental accident caused me to lose the love of my life. I gained superpowers after 3 months in a coma. Now I'm trying to repeat the experiment from the night of the accident. Real-time monitoring and recording. The temperature is normal, the humidity is normal, the power supply is stable, the mixed liquid is ready, everything is ready, the experiment begins. Aiming the video camera at the small operating table less than half a meter away from him, Riang began to examine himself, the most important experiment at present. On the table, there is an idealized, weapon shell, without metal plating. This is where the appearance of the Stark industrial weapon device is simulated. Jean does not have enough money to simulate 100% of the experimental process. All he can do is to achieve the best possible result. The 2 cans of mixture came from the last gift from the weapons department of Stark Industries that had been removed. Jaeon spent a lot of money to buy something that was no longer useful to the Stark group, but this was already expensive and must be extra economical. Coupled with the expensive experimental benches and instruments, this is a big expense for Jean now, a series of disappointing investments. The only thing that is gratifying is that Jean no longer has to spend money. Invest in the electricity supply that costs the most in the experiment. Super speed converts internal energy savings into external electrical energy savings during running. After being extracted from the lightning suit, it can meet all the needs of the experiment. The only price is that Angers needs to sacrifice more rest time to complete all of this. And now all the preliminary preparations are in place. Drop. Similar to the ticking sound of a timer, this is the intelligent voice control system designed by Jaeon working. The camera has focused and the experiment starts from this moment. The mixed liquid has entered a state of compatibility, and the power supply is normally cut off. He stared at the test bench in front of him, waiting for the mixing degree of the mixed liquid on the data display panel to reach the same state as that night. Before the 0 point, in an instant Jaeon will press the power off button. At that time, the mixed liquid in the unsaturated state will completely release its energy because it loses the restriction of the pressure device, repeating the experimental failure environment that night, and Jean will once again witness the adventure-like experience that day. Drop, 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 drop. As the value on the 0 point display gets closer and closer, Jean's calm eyes begin to become fanatical, and golden lightning looms on his body. Jean must grasp the time perfectly. This is a test of speed. And luckily for him, Jung is very fast. Power outage. Soon after, the cutoff button was pressed for a moment, and the mixed warriors of different colors began to become restless at this moment. Without the restriction of the high-voltage device, the energy began to become restless. Boom, boom. The former roar came from the mixed liquid that broke through the limitations of the experimental device. The latter came from Jung, who exploded with a lightning force field and moved at full speed in a small space. Jung had to witness the failure of the experiment again with his own eyes. He could not leave at this critical moment. His running body was avoiding the experimental equipment and broken debris that continued to fly out due to the explosion. The energy generated by his running body was the wind may make the scene a mess. Debris, metal slag, and flowing mixture were scattered everywhere in this sewer-safe house. Fortunately, the smart device that was the most difficult to rearrange survived because it was placed at a high place and was full of pungent smell. The liquid flows downstream along the sewer sewage treatment system. The light is dark. Bang. In the moment of Riang, Habi once again escaped the destruction caused by himself. Dozens of experiments and verifications in the past 3 months have enabled him to skillfully avoid the dangerous explosions. It was not until he came back again that he put his hands on his waist. Only then did Riang enter the troubles again. Sooner or later, FC will run out of money if this continues. Jung was worried about this. The amount of money he invested in Ao Capital Enterprises was not much, probably less than 100,000. This investment was not even a small amount of money for the entire financial market. No, although there was a small return, Jung got a sum of money to buy materials. But this may be his last experiment, and he's running out of materials. And many more. Suddenly, Riang seemed to realize what had happened at that moment. A vague strangeness began to tremble in Riang's brain. The sense of crisis that he didn't know came from made him feel like a light was ambushing him on all sides. Looking around Soizao, he could only find the same simple safe houses and dirty buildings. Sewer environment, no one will come in here at all. However, Jaeon will not let down his vigilance because of this. Such neuroprediction of crises has saved his life several times in the past 6 months. Boom. When the lightning force field was activated, Riang immediately decided to take back his suit. No matter what kind of crisis targeted him, he must have enough counterattack ability to be safe. This feeling comes again. When the lightning force field was turned on, Riang saw that due to his accelerated speed, he could see floating liquid particles and flowing air in the surrounding environment from a dynamic perspective. But why is it slower than usual? Shoo! With a sprint, Jung came to the tank of the battle suit. The compartment window opened at super speed, but only an empty slot could be seen. Where did the suit go? Buzz buzz. The tremors that began to intensify were beating like crazy in Riang's head at the same time. Jung is a fool if he doesn't understand that he has been exposed. But where does the crisis come from? No one around is so obvious anymore. When Riang looked up, he first saw a pair of eyes looking down at him, a pair of women's eyes. Are you looking for this? The bald woman wearing an oriental gown held a folding fan in her left hand, and held Riang's yellow battle suit in her right hand. It's very exquisite workmanship. I can see that you put a lot of effort into it. The woman seemed to admire everything about Riang in the safe house, as if everything he did was completely under her control. Pay attention. The meaning of safe house is no longer safe. Boom. Jaeon didn't know who this woman was, but he knew that he had been exposed. Jaeon, who no longer trusted anyone, would not allow his secret to be known to others, especially when he was not wearing a battle suit, and the most important thing was that he didn't know who this woman was. One thing, if the sense of crisis this woman brought to Jung before was correct, then Riang can conclude that he will definitely not be able to outrun this woman, not in the sense of speed. The lightning force field exploded instantly, and Riang rushed towards the woman's position with all his strength. He was confident that his speed could match this woman's, even though the sense of crisis told him that the enemy was strong and we were weak at this moment. Boom. As soon as Riang's foot took the first step, a thunderous change appeared behind him, like a twisting snake, and the entire inner space of the sewer began to twist and rotate in a way that was extremely inconsistent with the concept of physics. The masonry and steel bars were completely distorted by some powerful force. The overwhelming and oppressive momentum from top to bottom made people unable to breathe at all. Jung intuitively felt like an ant sandwiched in a roll cake. Same. But at this dark intersection, he couldn't see any light or hope. Run. Jung's sense of crisis broke out. Although he didn't understand where all this unreasonableness came from, he could almost see the computer still running in his safe house at the same time that the environment was changed. It just changed with the terrain. When it is raised, the computer is also squeezed, but it is still running no matter what, as if the dislocated visual effect is only external. If the touch under his feet hadn't told him that he was heading uphill, maybe he would have chosen to stop and wait for the power and changes that would come after all this change. But now Jaeon needs to race against time. Get out of here before the sewer is completely crushed into a ball. Boom. Golden arcs of electricity instantly erupted from Riang's body. A super sprint that instantly broke through the sound barrier. Even a 900x continuous shooting camera could not capture a complete and clear image of Riang. After a golden flash on the spot, the tail of lightning rushed up to a high place carrying Riang's body. From the dynamic perspective, everything that Riang sees and experiences is dozens of times that of ordinary people. Under normal conditions, Riang's speed can reach 45 times that of ordinary people, and under a super explosion, this value will be even higher. Levels doubled. It's so fast. Behind Riang, as if looking at an interesting cat, the bald woman gently waved the folding fan in her hand. The slightly raised corners of her mouth proved that she was quite satisfied with everything she was doing now, and she just waved. You can achieve such earth-shattering distortions with just a wave of your hand. It seems that the mirror world can't contain you yet, the woman floating in the air walked forward. Her body seemed to ignore all obstacles. No matter how the bricks and iron blocks were changed, in this woman's body the hands will return to their original appearance like the power of creation. Compared with Riang's all-out escape from the crisis, this woman took a broad road. Who? New work time. Riang didn't know why he rushed out of the sewer opening. He thought this was the nearest position where he could see the light, so Riang risked his own life and escaped along the manhole cover. Behind him was still the twisting and winding terrain. However, compared to the underground, Riang was still worried about whether he would be exposed during the crisis, but it was not until he rushed out of the ground that he discovered. Everything is not what Jean imagined in his mind. How could they? The energy impact when Riang broke through the sewer entrance was really big. Even the thickened ground was hit by the arc and a crack was created. However, even so, Riang still didn't see any expressions of surprise or fear in the eyes of passers-by around him. Everything is going on in an orderly manner, vehicles are still driving, and pedestrians are still strolling. You're curious, aren't you? The bald woman appeared from the ground as if out of nowhere and came behind Riang again. Riang's crisis nerves started to beat again. Once again, he didn't notice the arrival of this woman. She was like a ghost, telling him that he was helpless. You are as curious as I am curious about you, time eraser. The woman used a particularly strange description to describe her title to Riang. Time eraser. Jung didn't understand what this title meant, but at this time, the bald woman was chatting with him in a casual manner, without changing any terrain to create trouble and chaos. What was her purpose? Get the suit back first. Jaeon couldn't help but think in his heart that he was quite insecure now. 0 o'clock in the morning was about to come again. Jaeon urgently needed the energy reserve function in the suit to reduce his pain when the energy exploded. What's more, he didn't think he could survive the energy explosion. Negative status can be used to fight this strange lady. Boom! Lightning broke out again, and Riang aimed at the shirt in the woman's hand. She followed him all the way but did not destroy or throw away the shirt. This was Riang's opportunity. Retreat with one strike. Don't leave any chance for the opponent to react and then recover the disadvantage. This is the tactic that Jean decided in an instant. The full set of computing power in the suit can give him greater assistance in action, so he did this when he decided on the tactic. Shoo! In less than a blink of an eye, Riang saw in the lightning that the distorted light around him emitted a colorful spectrum as the air refracted. Everything that was moving in the surrounding environment stopped at this moment. Riang rushed towards the woman's side. His target was his own suit. The circuitous running direction allowed Jung to avoid the woman's possible counterattack to the greatest extent, and then he grabbed his own suit and put it on in the next moment. Nothing would happen more than 0.001 seconds. Okay. Without feeling any resistance, Riang moved his paws towards the hem of the suit. Everything went as smoothly as he imagined. The woman still kept smiling and standing as before, as if the suit had nothing to do with her. Aang continued to rush forward and was about to turn around and return to where he was. Jung saw the most terrifying scene since he got this superpower. Zah! Blink! This woman is blinking, she can see me. Riang was shocked. He had to say that he had considered all possible scenarios, but he did not expect that this woman could keep up with his speed. Swoosh! However, the action of changing the suit is still the same. Jaeon only needs to put the equipment on his body immediately. He does not even need to take off his jacket. The daily dress of thin shirt gives Jaeon the opportunity to save the time of changing clothes to the maximum extent. After Riang finished changing his clothes, the yellow leather jacket that kept his body in a state of slight shock began to absorb an energy to maintain Riang's physical condition. At the same time, real-time monitoring came online again, which made Riang feel relieved a lot. But he still has no confidence in this woman, and he has no confidence that he can defeat her. You're surprised, aren't you? The woman spoke first before he could finish his statement. She was not surprised by his reaction at all. On the contrary, she was very excited about being able to tease this grumpy young man in every way. Thousands of years of life have rarely been able to bring about her current emotions, so the woman plans to continue this process. Your purpose, why did you come here? Riang's eyes were full of wariness, and the suit did not give him any sense of security. If this woman could keep up with him, it meant that he could only escape and not have the ability to fight back. What's more, he doesn't know everything about this woman so far, including any information. However, the woman didn't seem to intend to chat with him about anything more. We might as well play a fun game. Not interested, Riang refused without hesitation. However, until the first letter of "no interested" blurted out, in fact, Riang had just opened his mouth and his body was already moving. Speed is Riang's strong point, but rather than chatting with this woman who can pose a sufficient threat to him, he prefers to directly use actions to prove his expertise in assassination, or to escape. Boom! Lightning broke out again. Compared with before when he was not wearing the suit, Jaeon became faster. The reduced friction of the suit gave Jaeon a faster speed, and the energy storage and reabsorption functions allowed him to move faster. The burst increases exponentially. Comparing the speed with the previous one, perhaps before, Riang only completed the movement of half a breath, but now he has already rushed in front of the woman. And he raised his fists. The concentrated energy on the suit's gloves could smash the outer armor of a level 4 defense building with one punch. Unlike the previous use of sparing his hands when dealing with the police, Riang used his greatest strength to ensure that own safety. But at the same time that Jaeon started to move, almost at the same speed as Jaeon, the woman moved again. Now it was no longer just a blink, or her speed was a little slower than Jaeon. There was a strange feeling. Jaeon almost had an illusion about the concept of speed, as if it was not the other party that had become faster, but that he himself had become slower. However, no matter how much Jean thought about anything, he had already completed the striking action. On the other side, in response to Jean's attack, the woman also raised her folding fan. What she thought was just a fancy folding fan turned out to be a casual accessory. Unexpectedly, shiny lines appeared. Circles of mysterious lines appear in the air. It is simply a luster that comes out of nothing. There is no igniter or transition medium. There is no comparison object for this light on the physical level. It is like a picture in a flat space. What can be seen from another side angle is only a straight line instead of a circle. Boom! No matter how beautiful the aperture is, it is always completed in the woman's hands, and it is completed before Jean completes his attack. Dong! Zhong Sheng! Riang's arc fist struck the plane formed by the aperture and magic lines. It felt like a heavy hammer ringing the bell in the ancient temple. Even if the hammer was hard and powerful, it could only emit the sound as deafening, without causing any harm to the bell itself. There was no reaction force or energy impact. The woman seemed to be holding back, and she did not try to control what happened to Riang next. She still just looked at Riang with a smile, as if she was waiting for what he would do next. Her eyes were full of expectation. Run! Jaeon was frightened by this woman. He had never seen anything that could match his own speed, and he had never seen anything that could block his fist head-on. This completely subverted Jaeon's common sense of physics. If Jaeon's own superpower can also allow him to find ways to trace cause and effect. So what this woman is showing now is not as good as describing it directly with magic. This is unscientific. Shua. There was no hesitation and no feeling of shame. He was running. He was escaping. Just like a mouse frightened by an old cat, he began to escape with all his strength. In addition to his fastest speed so far, he wanted to escape. Go to the other side of the world, escape to a place where this woman can't find him. But, is this possible? Jaeon didn't know who he was facing, nor did he know her name. For a great magician who had guarded the earth for thousands of years, Jaeon's knowledge was still too young. Call. The woman waved her hand again, and the surrounding environment changed again. From the woman's special observation angle, she could still capture Jean's escape route. However, at the moment when Jean exploded with all his strength, she saw the surrounding area. Slight damage to space. This is the mirror world. As she said, the mirror world cannot contain a speedster, and if this game continues, it will end with Jaeon escaping. But the woman does not want to see such a result. She is full of interest in Jaeon. Although change does not mean good from the perspective of the future, a little more change does not seem to hurt. I'm asking you again, do you want to play a game with me? If the situation and the atmosphere were different, judging from the appearance of the bald woman, it would be a bit of a joke. However, in the current context, this is not a friendly question. It's like giving an order. Don't even think about it. Riang started to accelerate. Even at the speed, he still saw this woman following him, like a lingering female ghost. Riang was completely frightened by this woman. He did not observe all the subtle changes of this woman more carefully. He did not see the faint aging effect on her fair and visible skin when she kept up with his movements. In fact, it's not speed that Jaeon loses to women, it's time. Then I'm so sorry. After speaking, the woman waved her hand. Rumble. The world was spinning, and the whole world began to change dramatically under her control. The earth shaking, crushing, the momentary reversal of gravity, and the maximum shaping of magic in the mirror world were the last tricks that the woman prepared for Jaeon. For a moment, darkness. Even though he ran at speeds of thousands of kilometers per hour, he still couldn't keep up with the changing speed of the magnetic field. Under the influence of gravity, he lost control of everything he had. To make matters worse, the sky collapsed. Boom, tick tick. The sound of running water in the sewer is still there, and occasionally the squeaking of mice can be heard, because the damage to the safe house caused by the explosion of the mixed liquid has not yet been dealt with. At this moment, Riang is lying half unconscious on the sofa that has been affected by the explosion. Not awake. He also wore a bright yellow lightning suit. Everything was so peaceful. Until the arrival of midnight. Ah! The surging energy opened his eyes, and the pain in his body awakened the unconscious man. It's a new day, it's time to keep running. Run, crazy running. Whenever midnight comes, it is a huge pain and hardship for Jaeon. The surging speed force energy begins to be born from every cell in his body. It was absorbed into Jaeon during the experimental accident. The electrical energy in the body caused extremely strong mutations after going through a special transformation process. The energy gave Jaeon a body that would not age, but it also gave him unbearable torture. Boom! A huge electric arc once again ran through the city of New York, starting from Hell's Kitchen and spreading to every corner of the city, covering the entire city in just half a second. Jaeon's initial speed at 0 point has reached a level that even the fastest computers in the world cannot calculate. Perhaps, this is the reason why that woman left at this moment. Like a dream, a weird game, and a weird woman. After the initial vent, Jaeon only needs to spread the speed force in his body into the storage compartment of the suit, and then the suit will spread this power around and disappear into the air, while Jaeon's body cells pass through the initial expansion is also followed by a rapid contraction. And that means that his painful process has disappeared safely again, even though he still can't stop running. Hello. Hi. Riang ran at the front of the road, saying hello to everyone behind him. In the realm of the speed force, Riang could see himself in every branch of time. All the Rians seemed to have a collective consciousness. It seems that their brains can communicate. Although Jung doesn't know why this is, it is another violation of scientific theory, but it is much better than being alone. Loneliness is an original sin and you cannot trust anyone. Jung is the loneliest. I'm sorry, brothers, I can take a rest, it's already night here. You continue. The man running at the forefront of the time stream held a Mexican chipotle in his hand, and his figure followed the waving movements. And gradually disappeared from the sight of countless hot people behind him. It really disappeared completely. It was a time remnant, or all the heat is a time remnant. Every slight change in the time flow will lead to the generation of a heat in a different time period, but at the same time, they will depend on the existence of Riang at 0 o'clock. Jung, who had just entered the running state, knew for sure which one he was in the core. Everyone is for me, but I am not anyone. An inexplicable realization supported Jaeon's new world view. This is greater than using unscientific things to crush a scientific researcher's outlook. The former relies on creation, while the latter can only be regarded as utilization at best. 7 hours later, safe house. Although this place can no longer be considered safe, the appearance of that inexplicable woman makes Jean feel that he is always under surveillance. But why didn't she kill me? What is the time eraser? The woman left many questions for Jaeon, but she also left Jaeon a life. If I could be faster, it wouldn't be so bad. However, this also left Riang with the urge to become stronger. The speed force in his body was like a double-edged sword. It hurt Riang and at the same time gave him great strength. After he successfully retrieved Fu before Leia and taking revenge on Tony Stark, he wanted to be alive. Tony Stark. Jung thought of this guy's name, and the hatred in his heart couldn't help but be ignited again. A playboy who relied on his father's shadow, but he hurt the innocent people in the world time and time again, even if he put on the hero's uniform, which doesn't stop Jaeon from deciding that this is a fool. I won't kill you, but I will let you taste everything I taste. Maybe killing is not the root of ending a person's hatred. If Jean wants to ask Tony Stark to pay for his mistakes, then the best way is to destroy it. Destroy him it. At this moment, on the TV. Stark Group News Report. Stark Group Technology Expo. Stark Group Expo New York scene. Stark. There is news about Stark Group one after another. Jung is now keen to collect every relevant aspect of this guy. He wants to understand everything about this guy and then defeat him. Undoubtedly, that fool's arrogant style and unscrupulous partying style gave him enough exposure in front of the media, but what Jung needed was something more profound. What made Tony Stark? Now. Iron suit. No, it is energy. The former Stark military factory is not a powerhouse that dominates the military industry. Jean, who has worked in it, clearly understands that the Stark family's main industry is energy. More efficient civilian nuclear fusion and deeper confidential product, military cold fusion. This is the main thing that keeps Tony Stark standing. Replay. Riang clicked the remote control again. The screen returned to the video screen of the Stark Group Expo, but the video time was not adjusted at the beginning. Jung chose to play from the middle section. Shanhu Tsunami. This is the fanaticism that belongs to the Stark Group. It is exactly the same fanaticism as having a crazy chairman. Stark's own madness and brains drive the crazy character of the entire group. Facing the party where a superhero is coming, the crowd's enthusiasm is undoubtedly ignited to the extreme. But Jaeon, who is not at the same level as the crowd on TV, sees the problem from a different perspective. What ordinary people see is the admiration for Iron Man, but what Jaeon sees is a touch of the metal shell on the chest. Bright suspicion. It wasn't until a series of metal robotic arms separated the metal shell wrapped around Stark's body on the video screen that Jean saw the story inside, and the small glowing metal core. How do you achieve the power loss of an iron sheet of at least 25 tons when running at full power? Is it what is shrunk by cold nuclear fusion and is called the arc reactor by Playboy? I just like your arrogant character. Will the video clicking on the paused spot, through the blurry screen, Jung could see everything about Stark. Slap. With a snap of his fingers, Jung seemed to see hatred turning into flames in his eyes and burning Tony Stark alive. He wanted this cold fusion to become the first straw to ignite Stark Enterprises. Ruined it, Jaeon thought. Chapter 11. At this moment, with the Stark Group Expo going on, the Expo New York scene. At the scene, Tony and Happy were leaving the Expo Hall. Originally a show belonging to the entire group, the high-profile arrival of Iron Man Tony Stark meant that the atmosphere of the Expo was pushed to an even higher level. Although Tony Stark's arrival had a sense of overshadowing the show, it has to be said that Iron Man is the only superhero in the world whose identity has been revealed. Shaw's personal appeal is beyond people's expectations. Now, even leaving the scene has become a little difficult. After trading countless signed posters, he successfully and safely left the crowd and walked down the elevator. Tony's exclusive car was parked outside the door, a brand new XXX. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize it from the movie. What car? A young and charming lady was waiting for the owner of the car. Hey, look at the brand new car model. Happy, the fat assistant, pointed at the new car in front of him. He loved this car so much that it showed two people riding together. But, unexpectedly, did she come with the car? Tony Stark was still talking nonsense and not serious. I hope so. Happy gave a not so good expression, because if this beauty got into Tony's car, it meant that his fat assistant would have to find another way back, so angry. Tony didn't care about his assistant friend's slight depression and went straight to the car to shake hands with the lady. Hi, what do you call a beautiful woman? The beauty, executive officer, did not state her name, but her accent betrayed her place of origin. Irish girl, I like it. Tony's ungrateful face showed a hunting expression, but in fact he didn't plan to hook up at this time, so the handshake between the two was just a taste. Nice to meet you, Tony. The executive lady didn't care about Tony's distant attitude. She came here with a mission in mind. Tony seemed to completely ignore the lady's presence and walked straight to the cockpit. I'll drive, okay. Fatty Happy opened the car door and asked tentatively. He couldn't guarantee that Tony was not interested in this girl at the moment. Fatty didn't like to find tools to go home by himself. Maybe if he was a driver, he wouldn't be kicked out of the car. Well, after all, there are only two positions. Tony did not answer, but his actual actions showed his thoughts. He walked around to the passenger seat and threw his suit into the trunk of the car, waiting for Happy to drive. He also took the time to communicate with the executive lady. "Where are you from?" "Beford," the executive lady replied. "What are you doing here?" "I'm coming to find you." This kind of answer is a little surprising, but it is not beyond Tony's expectation, because in the head of this playboy who lowers his body to think about his thoughts, the lady who comes to him is most likely rushing to have a love. Maybe today will be no exception. Tony took a long time and finally sat in the driver's seat himself. His attitude towards this beautiful executive was self-evident. After closing the car door, before the executive came forward, he asked coldly, "Why are you looking for me?" While asking the question, he was preparing to write a check and hand over the address to let the girl find Tony's house by herself. However, the other party's unexpected answer gave Tony a big embarrassment. "A subpoena for you. I hate it." Tony's expression changed with all sorts of embarrassment. He felt a twinge of pain. "That I took you for granted, but you made me go to court." Unlike Tony's embarrassment, Happy, who understood that he did not have to ride alone, took on the responsibility of being the person to negotiate with the other party next. "Give me the summons." He doesn't like others giving him things. Happy took the summons with a forced smile on his face. "It's my quirk." Before these two guys could have an awkward conversation, the prosecutor lady had already said, "You have been ordered by the federal court to attend the Senate Armed Services Committee at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." A series of awkward conversations made Tony feel that his cautiousness had been crushed, and the childish middle-aged man planned to take a little revenge. "Can I see your police badge?" Tony refused. Yes, he wants to see the police badge. He really likes the police badge. Happy's answer was like a fool. The prosecutor lady took out a tiny metal buckler from her arms and raised the corners of her mouth with a victorious smile. The result was self-evident. "Are you satisfied?" Tony was speechless. The roar of a car engine. In the corner of the New York Expo, there was Jean, who had watched Tony's embarrassing experience throughout the whole process. It seemed that Jean was particularly happy that the playboy was able to be defeated, just like watching the pleasure of a bubble show. Sometimes a peek at the scene is more exciting than a live TV broadcast. Jung is not yet crazy enough to choose the idea of stealing this playboy in public, but now he has a good plan. Future new city planning layout. Stark, you really have a good father. With the satisfaction of harvest, Jung saw more. From the perspective of others, this is just a conference to enthusiastically support their idol superhero Iron Man. For those who like excitement and technology, this is an exhibition of future technology. For politicians and businessmen, this is a party to meet the rich and powerful. Different groups of people have different psychological positionings for this expo, and Jean is a scientist. At least he views all this as a PhD in electrical engineering and a thermal weapons researcher. Perhaps it is because of his simplicity. Only by thinking can he find the key point behind this inconspicuous video of the past. "Well, it seems that I need to increase my workload recently." Full of expectations for harvest and the near future, Jung left the scene in a strong wind. Boom. Deep in New York's sewers, Jaeon's safe house. Real-time monitoring. Use Route 1 to continue to pay attention to the trends of Stark Group. At the same time, the third test of the Lightning Suit Reliability Research Test begins now. On the operating table, the clean ruins were gone and replaced with brand new experimental equipment and brand new experimental subjects. This time, Riang no longer conducted repeated experiments during a power outage. The experimental subject of Riang was a lightning leather jacket. Iron Man's cold fusion small reactor is a good breakthrough, but the initial trigger for this concept was the lack of energy. Energy utilization is the theme of this era. Tony Stark can do it, so why is it hot? Unflashes can't. Jaeon started to take action. He wanted to do better than that guy. "My name is Jean, and I was employed by Stark Industries 6 months ago to work on weapons research and development. An experimental accident caused me to lose my beloved, and at the same time, I gained my superpowers because of this accident. And now, I'm doing an equipment experiment. The cold fusion miniaturized reactor is really a genius idea, but it seems that this is not your own initiative. I have to say that you really have a good father. Jung flipped through the comments on the internet about Mr. Howard Stark many years ago. Some document records from that year. Trying to find clues related to the blackout that night, and now Jaeon has an idea. I found an idea. Looking at the structure of a new type of element being scaled on the monitor, even though he knew that this was not something he could develop, he could see the breakthrough he wanted. Riang excitedly kissed the matchmaker on his ring finger, thinking of Freya through the ring. A burnt wedding ring, but this is all that is temporarily filled in Riang's heart. The rest of the excess emptiness is filled with evil thoughts of hatred. It is true that in terms of the meaning of nuclear fusion, usually cold fusion means more efficient and more powerful nuclear energy, but compared to large cold fusion reactors, small reactors are still difficult to complete with current technology. This is almost just the idea, but Tony Stark, the playboy, used his own brain to realize this idea. Jaeon originally thought that this was just Mr. Tony's initiative, but after watching Howard's video, Jaeon overturned his idea. This was definitely not Tony's first initiative. At least in terms of thinking, it was definitely the inheritance of his father's legacy. The legacy of his father. In addition, regarding the research on the suit, the energy utilization rate of the Lightning suit does not seem to be much worse than that of Iron Man's reactor. The only difference is the grade limit of the raw materials. Iron Man's armor uses the world's top gold titanium alloy structure. But for Jean, he could only use this material on the soles of his feet as accelerating hooks. The large area materials of the suit are still conductive metal plates and heat-resistant and cold-resistant leather. Einstein conceived the fifth elemental wave Anya condensed body Riang cannot be made yet. In ideal conditions, absolute anti-slip and anti-impact materials almost do not exist in reality. If this guy knows that there are piles of this metal material in a certain African country. I need something that can compete with cold fusion, etc. Jung found that he seemed to have thought something wrong. Real-time monitoring, record what I just said and save it. Then, the experiment begins. Riang frowned slightly and decided to directly start research on the lightning leather material. The existence of this subject itself does not seem to conflict with Iron Man's cold nuclear fusion reactor. Drop. The voice-activated intelligence system immediately starts execution after receiving the command. With an order, the intelligent control device began to control the test bench. The display lit up, the power supply kept running, the ventilation system was stable, the temperature began to be calibrated with the outside room temperature, and the humidity was controlled at around 50, everything was ready, and the experiment start. The Lightning Suit Enhancement Feasibility Experiment is ready. Now we start to synthesize leather clothing materials and prepare materials for Model 3. While inputting the parameters in hand, he controlled the device on the mechanical platform to mix the chemical elements in the flask. He needed to create a series of external equipment that could stably help him speed up. From the research data of the past 3 months, Jean discovered the reason why his speed was always unable to reach the theoretical fastest value. The energy generated by the lightning force field was originally enough to reach a higher speed, and with every move of Jean breaking through the upper limit of its own theoretical speed value, the lightning force field will also be strengthened. But the speed has increased, but it still cannot reach the maximum speed that can theoretically be achieved by the current supplied lightning energy. This is a problem of energy waste, and Zheng needs to solve this problem now, so he looks for the reason from external devices. This is the first step that Genzo needs to take. The energy storage and reuse of the lightning logo on the chest does realize the reuse of wasted lightning energy in some cases, but the power of lightning is huge, and what the breastplate can extract is only a negligible part, so from the leather jacket finding answers from the materials is the key way out. Find or synthesize a number of materials that can withstand pressure and high temperatures, and can also store energy and feed back the stored energy to maintain a constant temperature at low temperatures. Jaeon needs this kind of material. Although it is difficult, he is trying to find similar materials. Substitute. Drop. As the compounds in the flask were mixed, heated and irradiated with special energy rays, a sticky piece appeared in the flask. The red light on the experimental platform turned into green, and a burst of low-temperature jets of air were released from the 2 fumaroles. The things synthesized in the experiment appeared in front of Jean's eyes. Come on, let's see what I made. I hope it can be useful to me. Jaeon never guarantees that he can succeed in the first time, so with the possibility of failure, Jayan moved this mixed creation and placed it on the stage. Under special force field conditions. Real-time monitoring, calibrating the energy of the badge, adjusting the parameters to the value of my maximum speed during exercise, keeping the release power increase speed at around 10, observing and recording the changes in various parameters of the experimental subjects. On the other side, on the Shield aerospace carrier. In Nick Fury's office, the black cloak-obsessed Cyclops was flipping through the conclusion report handed over by Phil Coulson, while Coulson himself was sitting on the sofa with a smile, waiting for his boss's evaluation of his work. Good job. After a long time, Fury put down the file and took a sip of the coffee on the table. It seemed that it didn't taste very good after smashing it into his mouth. Phil Coulson kept smiling and said nothing, waiting for Nick's next words. Although you did not complete the task I assigned you in terms of work, you handled the aftermath very well and did not leave any traces at the scene. Well, the control of firearms by the Special Forces seems to be tightened. It seems that the content on weapons control in the materials is we can put forward some conditions to the Parliament. When will private hospitals be allowed to possess firearms with a caliber exceeding 19? It should be able to get a lot of work funds. Nick Fury didn't seem to talk about the key points, but was looking at some irrelevant things in the report. Sir, you seem to have gone astray, Kelson reminded softly. Oh, I know, you did a good job, and your evaluation of the Lightning Man is very pertinent. From the uploaded records, it seems that the other person has no antisocial tendencies, but it seems that he likes to run around. At this stage, we are now restricted by the above. It's not small. In terms of funding, Natasha is ready to send the bad boy as an assistant. You have done a good job here, but I hope you can do better in the subsequent work. The way he spoke was rambling. But the content is still complete. This is Nick Fury's style. It's a style that feels off-kilter but quite serious. Well, it's true that at least the one eye looks scary. Okay, sir, I understand. Even though Nick did not explain his real order, from the perspective of the agent's language, Nick Fury had already assigned his mission to Phil Coulson at this time. This was in the face of special communication methods used in situations where third-party undercover agents may exist. Phil Coulson stood up to take back the information handed over by Nick Fury, saluted and prepared to leave. When I walked to the door, I heard Nick's last voice again. By the way, one more thing, remember to fire the guy who bought the coffee. I don't like the taste of the coffee he bought. Nick gave an unclear instruction, which was also used by agents. Okay, sir. Kelson closed the door and left. The aerospace aircraft carrier is still flying in the sky, and all trajectories are proceeding as they should. Everything is normal. The U.S. Gun Control Act stipulates that all weapons with a bullet caliber exceeding 20 mm are not considered firearms, those with a bullet caliber less than or equal to 20 mm are considered firearms, and those with bullets greater than 20 mm are considered cannons. Guards at private hospitals are not included in the police force. Although they can possess automatic firearms, they do not have the right to use cannons. What Nick wants to express. Dissatisfaction with the coffee on the table means dissatisfaction with the existence of leaked spies in Kelson's field team. Emphasizing gun control and referring to Parliament indicate that someone in Parliament had a hand in arranging spies and that this practice was illegal. The lack of funds and asking for funds means that Nick does not know who the other party is yet, but he can use this matter to obtain benefits from the other party. The evaluation of the Lightning Man shows that he has no antisocial tendencies, indicating that in Nick's opinion the Lightning Man can be won over but needs to be guarded against, while his tendency to run around indicates that the other person is an uncontrollable and unstable factor. Mentioning Natasha then indicates that Kelson should work harder to follow up, indicating that Kelson is as trustworthy as Natasha, while follow-up means continuing to investigate and waiting for a response. The explanations here do not count towards the word count. My name is Jean Flash, and I was employed by Stark Industries 6 months ago to engage in weapons research and development. I lost my love due to an experimental accident, but I also gained extraordinary abilities because of it. And now I'm sad. Looking at the mysterious black substance in the experimental sealing device that was roasted by high heat energy waves and was charred on the outside and tender on the inside, he knew that his material synthesis experiment had failed again. Although upgrading and improving the equipment was a long process, this still making Jung feel a little frustrated. Okay, let me find the reason. monitor in real time, play back the experimental records, and mark the time period when the parameters peak when the mixed material is damaged. Holding his forehead with one hand, Riang issued an order to the artificial intelligence. After the beep, the system boots up and performs the operation immediately. A blurry video screen filled with lightning and black flavor. From the screen, you can see how much impact this mixed material has withstood under the conditions of the lightning force field. The lightning force field, which is more powerful than nuclear energy, is enough to destroy everything else in the world. Something more solid, but as its carrier itself, Zheng remained unharmed from beginning to end. What on earth are you? Riang looked at his hands in confusion, trying to find the answer to his doubts, but he couldn't think of anything. There is no problem with the material itself. It has good high temperature resistance and good toughness. It maintains perfect experimental parameters in the high-speed motion simulated under experimental conditions, but now there is a fatal problem in the energy feedback link. Still the fool here in the cold fusion reactor. Riang couldn't imagine running on the street wearing a leather jacket made of such a material. Once the lightning force field broke through to the theoretical peak of speed, the situation he would face next would be very difficult. A palm-sized piece of mixed material was struck by lightning. After the energy was wrapped, it instantly shrank to less than 1/3 of its original size, and the missing part turned into a black unknown substance that remained in the experimental device for a short moment before disappearing. Samples cannot be collected in any physical way. It looks like a wormhole, unobservable but real. With doubts about the reliability of his conjecture and subsequent experiments, Zheng remained speechless. The next day, dawn. Jean got up early from the secret base. He didn't have the habit of snoozing. He had very important things to complete today. Real-time monitoring start. The indicator light of the DD Smart system flickered gently, and after a dizzying screen distortion, a dizzying set of letters appeared in front of Riang's eyes. Keep home. Today I'm going to the library to search for information and continue to monitor the Stark group. If there are relevant changes in the news, remember to remind me to come back on the pager. Zheng seemed to be chatting with an old friend. Easy. From an ordinary person's point of view, it is difficult for people to understand the heart of a solitary person. Although Zhayan can run faster to chat with himself at all times, for Zhayan, the real-time monitoring of this only he is capable of equipment but seems to be the only loyal minister who can give him normal dialogue. Loyalty means trust. Regardless of whether the beating of the digital code on the worn-out electronic display represented real-time monitoring or whether he could understand what he meant, Riang's figure was distorted. Wang. With infinite vibration and high-speed movement, a set of dark yellow leather clothes appeared on Riang's body, as if they appeared out of nowhere. Go, roared, accompanied by lightning and galloping wind, and under the ripples of dirty water stains in the sewer, Riang rushed out of his home. Today's purpose is the library. The first thing to deal with is the compatibility between the suit and the relative energy, which will be of greater help to Jaeon's speed. However, the cold nuclear fusion seems to be more complete than Jaeon's own ideas. It is not difficult to find information. He discovered that 2 generations of the Stark family had gone to MIT, so he decided to take a photo there and perhaps find the notes left by the elder Howard. Of course, the more important point is that Jean himself also studied in this school. Jean Fleisch, a PhD in the Department of Electrical and Mechanical Engineering at MIT. Boom. The soles of the feet are stepped on tiny hooks of gold and titanium alloy to increase the grip, and the golden arc light and shadow are trailed behind to help the body tell the movement. From Jaeon's secret base in the sewers of downtown New York, to the MIT library. Crossing the distance of several states, this is no less than a challenge for Jaeon, who has never used his superpower to run such a distance, but it is also a test of his ability. 3 months of ability training has given Jean not only super speed, but also extraordinary endurance and resilience. Jean has always wanted to know where his limit is, and now he is a man who has never experienced it before. Opportunity. Run. A bright golden light and shadow is speeding along the U.S. State Highway. It does not appear dazzling under the light of day, but the speed observed from the satellite is so eye-popping, surpassing most fighter jets. Running at supersonic speed, one moment he was passing the shadow of a rural town, but the next moment he was distracted and suddenly discovered that the other party had arrived in a city several kilometers away from the town. From New York City on the eastern side of Manhattan to Marseille, where MIT is located, it spans a straight line distance of tens of kilometers, and the curves and detours on the road do not need to be carefully calculated. I started running at dawn, and in the early morning the crowd began to become busy, and the number of pedestrians on the road began to increase. Until the morning light first appeared, but before all the sleeping people in a city woke up, Riang had already arrived. 184 kilometers in a straight line. It took 9 minutes and 7 seconds to do a great job. Holding the Mexican chipotle in his hand, Jung looked at the time counter in the hood of his battle suit and felt slightly proud. The speed is increasing every day, so that's it. It means he is getting faster and stronger, which is good news and worthy of his happiness. Back again. Jung is back here again. Today, he will find what he is looking for. Wang. Vibrate. Rotate. At a street intersection that ordinary people would not pass by casually, Riang stepped in, wearing a bright yellow lightning leather jacket, walked in from the corner, and walked out again less than half a second later. Instead, they were dressed in the usual thin shirts, and the yellow lightning logo was too conspicuous. But if it were replaced by a graduate returning to the school reading library with a school badge, then everything would be reasonable and unobtrusive. Once again, Jaeon has laid out his own path so well that one cannot fault the details. On the other side, in the courts of the United States Congress, Tony Stark, who received the summons, still sat in his position with reluctance and contempt for the system, a position targeted by politicians. After more than half an hour of parliamentary proceedings, countless military and political leaders left behind unfamiliar faces. They came here with relaxed confidence and left with an arrogant victory. Stark was still fighting, the invincible Stark. At the scene, the defeated Hammer and the political bosses who were pushed back by Stark were thinking about a new round of strategies with unkind expressions. There is still a long way to go, and everything is still going as it should. Shield Space Carrier. In the global satellite monitoring and tracking data room, a photo glowing with heat was spit out from the printer. Kelson, who was sitting in the command room, received a monitoring report from his subordinates. Sir, there is a new movement in the surveillance target. It has left New York. The target location is moving in the direction of Marseille at a speed of more than 900 kilometers. A long series of photos and images with coding and recording traces were displayed in front of Phil Coulson. The person in the photo, the man, is none other than Gene Flash running on the road. Leave New York and continue to track the target, and dispatch agents in the Marseille area to immediately execute the surveillance order and record all the target's movement status. Forget it, this matter must be reported to the director immediately. Immediately order the Intelligence Analysis Office of the General Staff to use the existing information to investigate the opponent. Analyze and screen the identity of the person. The experienced Kelson thought of a lot when he received the message, but as an experienced field agent, Kelson's first reaction was still to find out the other party's truth. Analyzing useful intelligence based on limited information is a required course for agents, and it is the duty of a subordinate to pass the intelligence to the top as soon as possible. It must be said that Kelson is the executor of orders. Very good, just like Nick trusted. Yes, looking at the back of the gentleman agent who left in a hurry, the subordinate surveillance operator received the order. But after Kelson left completely, and after confirming that the control room would no longer be disturbed by any sources, an encrypted intelligence line that did not belong to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s internal intelligence line was sent. I don't know what the meaning of this short sentence of lightning derailment is, and I don't know what purpose the person behind receiving this message is secretly monitoring all of this. Like a basilisk hidden in the deep water, it is eerie and dark. Outside the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Gene Fresh, dressed as a student, arrived at the campus he had not seen for a long time. I didn't expect that I would come back here with such an identity, looking like a thief. Riang lowered the brim of the hat on his head with a self-deprecating smile, making himself lost in the shadow of his eyes, among the crowd. When he arrived, he could guess that his running process could not stop the surveillance methods of the state machine, so he had no intention of trying to hide it. The real trick he used to conceal his identity was reflected in his arrival at his alma mater. Later changes. Wang. There was a tremor on his face. In an inconspicuous corner blocked by the shadow of the hat brim, Riang vibrated his facial muscles. The super speed enhanced by lightning had the ability of rapid concussion. This not only gave Rian the ability to change the ability of its own molecules to vibrate smoothly, also gives Rian the ability to disguise himself and wear casual clothes in a short period of time. The purpose of the school badge is to return to school, but Jaeon does not intend to let anyone know which book he has read or which information he has read. He wants to complete everything without leaving any trace. It was just an intersecting moment. No passerby would have thought that the thin young man who passed by him would change his appearance in the next second. The bridge of his nose would become shorter, his lips would be slightly wider, and the muscles on his forehead would be slightly bulging forward. It looks like the frontal bones are deformed, and the muscles on both sides of the cheeks are bulging. At this time, the heat is completely different from others. No one will know who has been here. With a confident smile, Rian walked into the long-lost campus library, a unique collection of books that can only be borrowed from the Massachusetts Library. This is the purpose of Jaeon's trip. In order to investigate the connection between cold fusion and the New York blackout, Jaeon needs to understand the general principles and structure of the Stark Group's cold fusion reactor, but this cannot be found on the internet. As for the answer, the real knowledge only exists in the minds of a few scholars who specialize in this field, or in the relevant books collected by various libraries. Coincidentally, Tony Stark and his father Howard Stark both graduated from this school, MIT, Jean's alma mater. Let me look for cold fusion information. Where are you? With the speed of one glance and 10 lines, the advantage of super speed is fully reflected in Jean. It only takes a short moment to read all the books in the library, but in order not to attract attention, Jean must be careful, even if he has slowed down the speed of observation. But at this moment, Jung is still looking for all the signatures on the bookshelf at a super speed that ordinary people cannot understand. Author: Howard Stark, written on May 1969, 5. I found it. Within a moment, a black book with the name of the Playboy's father appeared in his sight. The time is consistent, and the name looks good. Based on the introduction to realistic applications of cold fusion, it is a relatively easy to understand book for this profession. However, judging from the dust accumulated in writing, no one cares about it here. For a long time. Perhaps because it was placed in the old book area, this book was not noticed at the time. However, many years later, the practical application of cold nuclear fusion has been discovered by Tony Stark, son of Howard Stark. Realized, and this book has truly lost its reading value. It really brings the treasure to dust. Howard Stark pointed at your author's name. I don't think you should have been left out for so long. The injustice of the scholars made Jaeon temporarily angry, but after thinking of his own purpose, Jaeon still won. It hangs high on the bookshelf. Call. A gust of wind passed by the coolness of the shoulders. This was the lightning-fast Jaeon taking the book off the bookshelf without being noticed by anyone, but at the same time, Jaeon seemed to have taken the book with him that he did not want to take down. Of another book. Snapped. The heavy banging sound appeared in the quiet reading room, which attracted the attention of many readers who were immersed in the sea of books, but when this group of Massachusetts students turned their attention here, they found that there was nothing there. Except for the breeze hanging out of the open glass window on the balcony, which caused the curtains to sway, this insignificant episode, as if nothing had ever happened, did not cause any waves. Everything in the reading room remained quiet. In the corner, Rian was trembling with fear, fearing that a careless mistake would cause unnecessary trouble. At the same time, he looked at the book in his hand that should not have fallen to the ground with hatred. An Introduction to Miniaturization Improvements based on the realization of cold fusion. Author: Anthony Vanke. The book was published on March 1969, 3. An inconspicuous book title and author as well as the time of writing caught Jean's sight. Perhaps before finding Howard's book, Jean would not have cared about this book, which he had never even heard of the author's name. But now, with Howard's masterpiece as a comparison, the significance of this book has attracted Jean's attention. It was completed earlier than Howard, but why have I never heard of you? Well, you have aroused my interest. He was gearing up, and his interest as a scholar was ignited. Maybe Jung is not an expert in this kind of thing. But as a reader, he believed that he had the ability to distinguish between the two works. This book was written before Howard's previous masterpiece, and its content was even more advanced than Howard's design concept. However, the treatment it received was even more miserable than the one written by Howard. The former was at least better than the one written by Howard. What was mentioned in its philosophy was accomplished by its descendants, who have done nothing but collect dust on bookshelves. For a book that could be included in the MIT library, Jean did not believe that it would have no value, which gave Jean the idea of reading it. What's more, Jean is interested in the author of this book. He is very interested. This may be beneficial to Jean's deeper investigation into it. 2 books, 2 scientific works written in a short period of time but with very different contents. The author of one book is famous all over the country, but the author of the other book is unknown and unknown. Anthony Vanko's name has never been heard even in the scientific circle where Jayon belongs, but it is really because of this that the author is so famous. It was arousing to compare the 2 works. The main purpose of Howard's writing is to summarize and describe the prospects of cold nuclear fusion theory, and to conduct an in-depth analysis of a series of problems that will arise after its concrete realization, just like an architectural designer who is generally in-depth on the layout of the work. And meticulous. The latter's work by Anton Vanke also describes research on cold nuclear fusion, but the core content of the article is completely different from that of Howard. It can be seen from the lines that Anton Vanke is not a rigorous scientist. He cares more about the development of cold nuclear fusion in practical applications as not a theoretical summary. The description of the article is not grand but quite practical. Even the description of the cold nuclear fusion miniaturized arc reactor is better than what Anton Vanke mentioned in his work. More complete and more detailed. Literally speaking, Anton Vanke seems to be better, but why do I feel that Howard is more powerful? Playboy's father probably thought of the following things a long time ago. Above all, in terms of energy utilization and material selection, Howard is stronger. Jean closed the 2 books and looked at the value of the 2 books from the perspective of future generations. If he hadn't seen the useless video screen left by Howard Stark at the expo that day, and Jayon happened to guess the message hidden by Howard, then Jayon would never think that Howard was more powerful. Considering Howard's arrogance and view of cold nuclear fusion, what he describes in his book is only a drop in the bucket of the actual situation, but he also cleverly covers all the key points and proposes various possible areas for improvement. He expressed his own opinions and left behind valuable design ideas, which is very powerful for a scientist who focuses on practical applications. Jayon is also a scholar, and as an insider, he can naturally guess some of what happened that year. Perhaps the gap in academic concepts between Anton Vanke and Howard led to the differences in their works, and Howard saw further. Anton is more realistic. You are all the giants of the times. Being shelved in a cabinet is really a waste of treasures. Riang looked at the yellowed paper. No one cared about the 2 scientific works, and he couldn't help but feel sad in his heart. However, even so, the purpose of Riang's trip can be regarded as achieved. Of course, even from the perspective of a scholar, Jayon could clearly see the significance of these 2 books, but more importantly, he did not forget the purpose of his visit. He came to find information related to cold nuclear fusion and bring it back for further study. One-step research. It can be seen from the works that Howard is better, but Howard's design is also quite theoretical. For practical reasons, Anthony Vanke's idea should be more complete and closer to feasibility. From a short-term perspective, said that Anthony Vanke is what Jayon needs most at the moment. Jean, who came from New York to Massachusetts to search for information, has already gotten what he wants from the book. Even if he still does not have a deeper understanding of the principles and component structure of the cold fusion reactor device, Jean has already understood what he wants. Where exactly? In cold fusion experiments, large energy consumption will inevitably occur, and in miniaturization experiments, there will inevitably be instantaneous energy consumption losses. It was within these 3 months that Stark developed the arc reactor. That day the blackout at night must be because of this. It turns out that the Stark group concealed the accident. I finally understand. From the not-so-rigorous analysis, Jung had already understood his true goal. Because of Stark's extreme irresponsibility and Stark Group's concealment of the accident, Freya's disappearance did not receive any welfare compensation, and the lack of a body also led to the incident. It has never been determined to be caused by a man-made accident. Now that the goal has been set and the train of thought is clear, Jayon needs a cathartic goal and wants Stark to pay the due price. You took away the most important thing from me, and I will destroy the thing that you value most, the Stark Group. I will destroy you, I swear. Jung's eyes were full of hatred and resentment, even though Jung started from scratch. Wei didn't want to take away anyone's things, but at this moment, Jaeon's hatred of Stark was as high as ever. At first, perhaps because of his obsession with finding Freya, Jaeon did not think that the disappearance that night meant death. The unknown power of the lightning field made Jaeon guess that he might still meet Freya one day in the future. Reunion. However, the extremely irresponsible attitude and evasive gesture of the Stark group made Jean feel the humiliation of being ridiculed and teased. Now that Jean knew the truth of the matter, the time for real revenge has come. He needs see Tucker pays the price, Tony Stark. Boom. When the two books were once again put back to their original places, shelved in the corner of the cabinet. There was a ripple in the library, as if a strong wind blew in from the clear sky outside the window, disturbing the quiet harmony, but the empty scene was so empty, as if there were no traces of anything that had ever happened. Time, dusk and sunset. The Shield aerospace carrier floating in the clouds several kilometers above New York. Report, the detection target appears again, with a speed of 900 kilometers per hour, and the target is heading from Massachusetts towards New York. The news came from the monitoring room. Phil Coulson and Nick Fury, who were staying in the director's office, received the message at the same time. Sir, Coulson just sat upright slightly, as if he was not disturbed by the news. Nick Fury, who was flipping through documents on his desk, raised his egg-like head in surprise. It seems that athletes don't like to let themselves rest, and a person who doesn't let himself rest won't let others. Stop. Ask the surveillance department to continue to monitor and look for opportunities for appropriate contact. This time, you will take over the leadership of the team. Pay close attention to the movements of our real enemies, and don't let the fog block your sight. Nick Fury seems to be indifferent to the news about the Flash Runner in the report, but in fact this is not the case. There are too many things that need to be arranged in the recent period, and the initial creation of a secret alliance has attracted too much of Nick's attention. He will definitely be personally responsible for the affairs of this superpower at this moment. But fortunately, not all of S.H.I.E.L.D. are enemies. Nick also has a loyal subordinate worthy of his trust. Coulson's existence can alleviate a lot of burdens on Nick. The issuance of a series of orders means a phased summary of an event. After watching Nick close the report, Coulson stood up to take it and prepare to leave. However, during the gap between the door closing, Nick's last voice came. The speed of the lightning runner in the last report was only 900 kilometers. Yes, sir. Well, raise the opponent's danger level to level A but lower the threat level by 1 point. At the same time, seal the target file as top secret. I authorize you to take over this operational mission, codename, Lightning. Understood, sir. Coulson understood the other party's intention from Nick's caution and meditation. A superpower who can make major breakthroughs in his own abilities in a very short period of time is undoubtedly a huge threat to the stability of today's society. However, the other party has always been a loner and has never participated in any incidents that affect social security. This makes Nick Fury have the idea of recruiting. Coupled with the rumors of the establishment of a secret alliance that have been circulating recently, Kayerson probably understood Nick's plan. After another salute, the door closed completely. The scene is dusk and the sun sets, but the end of the day is not the end of the story, and all trajectories continue to move forward under the guidance of fate. In a secret base deep in the sewers of New York. When the goal has been clarified, Jaeon has already understood what he wants to do first and what he needs to do. To destroy Stark's industrial empire, Jung wants Stark to pay the due price. All accidents started with the experiment of cold nuclear fusion, so let it end from now on. Real-time monitoring, information search person, Anton Vanke, keywords, nuclear physicist. Drop. An electronic sound sounded softly, and then, most of the information transmitted back from the encrypted satellite channel came from Wikipedia on the internet, but a small amount of the essence was taken from internal information hidden in secret communication channels of various countries. Anton Vanke, a former Soviet nuclear physicist who joined the American Nuclear Physics Research Organization after the end of World War II. He worked with Howard Stark to develop the ARC project. Later, he was ostracized by Congress and the Stark family due to Cold War issues and other unfair treatment. Leaving the United States, last seen in the West Siberian icefield, whereabouts unknown. Relationship. Ivan Vanko, important achievements, Project ARC. A fairly general message didn't display much information, but the keyword part was enough for him to see what he wanted. As a former scientist in the Weapons Research and Development Department of the Stark Group, Jayan certainly knew what the Ark was, and now he was even more convinced that the cause of the blackout that night was Tony Stark's improvements to the Ark. Jayan seemed to see to the sorrow of feeling sympathy for each other. After a brief period of injustice, Jung seemed to see his companions on the road to implement a revenge plan against Stark. The Vanke family was persecuted by the Stark family, lost their most important achievement and left the United States, but Jayan did not. It wasn't because of Stark's irresponsible behavior that he lost the love of his life. Decades have passed, and even Anton Vanke, who is still alive, will not leave me anything. From the message record, Jung thought of the time he was in, immediately. Then he said, real-time monitoring, continue to search for information, Ivan Vanke, keywords, recent appearance location. Drop. Once again, the message was fed back, and the electronic display quickly showed what he wanted to see. Ivan Vanko. Russian and physics research enthusiast, educational background, none, important achievements, none, personal relationship, Ivan Vanko's father, last seen in Moscow. After one day, Moscow, the capital of Russia. The cold air blows on this land that is almost always frozen, and the autumn in September makes people feel the coldness of winter. Here, a bolt of lightning that does not belong to Moscow arrives. Boom! In a deserted street corner alley, there is the back entrance of an unknown slum tavern. The place exudes the disgusting smell of alcohol mixed with dirty bodily fluids. It is a place where people from all walks of life in Moscow are mixed, making people think that this is a medieval place. Europe. But here comes Jayan, here comes the lightning man in a yellow leather suit. The last place you appeared was this bar. It seems that as a junior nuclear physicist, your situation is not good. Jung said to himself, but it was also a greeting to the friendly forces he was about to see. The target location that the real-time monitoring feeds back from the message is this bar. Jayan traveled thousands of miles from New York, USA to Moscow just to find Ivan Vanke, who may have the same goal as him. The Stark Group brought Jayan unhappiness. Memories, then Jayan can only destroy it, and the first step to destroy it is to destroy its core things. Coincidentally, Ivan Vanke may have what Jayan wants. Squeak. Effortlessly pushing open the back door of the bar, and using his feet to lift the sleeping body of a drunkard blocking him in front of him, Riang arrived at the dark and gloomy hotel from the cold environment outside. There was a trembling shaking, and with the visual difference caused by the moment of light intersecting, Riang had already taken off his eye-catching bright yellow leather jacket and was wearing casual clothes. The arrival of strangers didn't seem to give the bar any life. This was a slum, a sinking place where drunkards gathered together. No one cared about a person they didn't know or interact with. Jung put down a few blue coins in front of the counter and took a glass of ale from the waiter's plate and headed towards the target location. Information retrieval showed that Ivan Vanke was in this building. The environment was dilapidated but not in a remote location. With Ivan Vanke's meager income from nuclear physics research, Ivan Vanke could just move in and do a small amount of work at the same time, follow up research. Jung didn't know if it was his own imagination. When he entered this building earlier, he had seen some used prayer utensils outside the hotel, and the ones that appeared as he went upstairs almost only appeared when people died in the West. Arrangement, a not-so-mature idea came into being in Jayan's mind. But the premise is that Ivan Vanke is worthy of his use. Who are you? When Jean swept through every room in the tavern at the speed of lightning and stopped at the final stop, standing in front of him was Ivan Vanke, who was starting research on the reactor. The strong body and solid muscles are not as weak and painful as written in the information. There are countless empty wine bottles around the platform where he conducts experiments, and there are many payment lists, at least from experience. Look, this guy is doing pretty well. In addition, there is a white cloth next to Ivan Vanko. Under the white cloth is the outline of a person, a dead person. Who died? Thinking about the prayer decorations and utensils downstairs, and then thinking about Ivan Vanko living alone at this time, the result is obvious. Would he die of hunger or anger? Riang pointed at Ivan Vanke, and then at a TV set nearby whose outline could be vaguely discerned but had been violently demolished. The walls around the room were filled with news and information about Tony Stark. It was obvious what Jean was referring to, and Ivan also wanted to understand what this guy was satirizing. But what Ivan Vanko cares about is who this fool is. Who is he? What is he doing here? Is he an enemy? Why did he suddenly appear? Countless doubts. Boom. An electric lock was thrown directly from Ivan Vanko's arm. The Russian directly explained his values with actions. Ivan Vanko doesn't care about Gene's identity and purpose. No matter what, he will leave here after completing the reactor and go to New York to find Tony Stark for revenge. And if Gene is his father's old enemy or a lackey of the government. By the way, Antony Vanko and Ivan Vanko have received a lot of help from the Russian government during these years of hiding. They are avoiding S.H.I.E.L.D.'s pursuit. The whole world hopes to get Iron Man's cold fusion shrink reactor manufacturing method. But only Wachang and Hydra of S.H.I.E.L.D. know that the arc reactor is not just a patent of the Stark family. 2 generations of the Stark family have enjoyed the life that Antony Vanko and his son should have enjoyed, but at this time they can only hide and live like mice. Until 2 days ago, Anthony Vanki was so angry that Iron Man appeared on TV during the New York Technology Expo. By this time, Ivan Vanki will not only be under pressure from the United States, but the Russian government that once helped them will also turn into a wild dog to eat Anthony's legacy, so it is not difficult to regard Riang as a hawk dog of the Russian government. Surprising. He is my father. Ivan Vanki spewed his own anger in his throat. Jung's words obviously stimulated him. No matter what he wanted to do now, whether he wanted to kill this yellow-skinned fool, he had to accept the irony. Pay the price for Anthony. The electric light is overwhelming. However, can he hit it? The sparking electric whip suddenly struck Riang. The energy absorbed directly from the arc reactor was converted into electrical energy and released from the 2 metal hoses. The output voltage was as high as tens of thousands of volts. It was unimaginable for Ivan Vanki. How on earth was it possible to twist them directly with both hands? What can be seen is that the moment Ivan Vanki grasped the handles of the 2 electric whips, his skin was torn apart, and his trembling muscles made him endure the pain caused by paralysis to attack. It must be said that Ivan Vanki is an expert. Tough guy. But it's of no use. Shoo! Jung appeared behind him in a flash. Then, bang! A kick hit Ivan Vanki in the back. Just where he used the cable to input current into the reactor, the demagnetized rotor began to accelerate crazily. In just a moment, the original bright white light in the small reactor box disappeared instantly. You ruined it, you ruined it. Ivan Vanki roared like crazy. He seemed to want to eat this guy into his stomach, or crush his bones into ashes. Ivan Vanki felt that he had been insulted and defeated again. You can have better. After Riang dodged again, bright yellow lightning suddenly appeared in front of Ivan Vanki. What the hell are you? Ivan Vanki's back lost the support of the arc. The cable without thrust was like a heavy iron rope, throwing him directly to the ground. In addition, the wounds on his hands lost their heat. The current continued to burn, and pain began to fill Ivan Vanki's heart. He couldn't stand up, but this hindered his fear of the unknown man in front of him. Jaeon spoke a devilish whisper with a trembling voice under the mask. This was another technique for using the speed force. It vibrated his body cells to achieve all the extended abilities, such as changing his voice, penetrating matter, and vibrating his hands. Create a vortex. Yellow lightning danced around Riang, coupled with the scarlet mask and eye patch and a red lightning mark on his chest. He really looked like a devil. Are you here to take my life or destroy everything about me? Ivan Vanki gritted his teeth, but he seemed unable to do anything other than this. The vodka within reach could not numb his pain and suffering, and he could not lift his arms. Ivan Vanki, who got up, suddenly dared to face death in a desperate situation. However, Jean did not come to see the depression or struggles of a dying man. You seem to have made a mistake from the beginning. Maybe I came at the wrong time. We could have had a good communication. Who are you? Ivan Vanki didn't hear the sincerity in Zhang's tone, but at least he felt that he didn't have to die for the time being. Zhang didn't intend to kill him, so why did he come here? You did it for the reactor. Ivan Vanki could only think of what remaining value he had to others. Ivan couldn't help but feel a little proud when he mentioned the reactor. This was his proud work. It was a brand new product modified using his father's template. It has more usable efficiency and output power than the first version, and can produce tens of thousands of volts. The voltage just depends on a small box. This is the source of Ivan Vanki's pride. But apparently he got the wrong person. Hiding away for a long time has not only corroded the brains of you 2 generations, but also blocked your eyes to see the world. You are already behind the times. What are you talking about, fool? Ivan Vanki felt humiliated. Jung's intention in belittling him was to look down on his reactor, which was the greatest blasphemy against him. Ha! Riang smiled contemptuously. Ivan Vanki, who did not recognize the reality, was still indulged in his own delusions. This era is no longer the world after World War II. The hiding life of 2 generations has not only corroded their honor, it also paralyzed their arrogance. Simple arrogance is not what Jaeon wants. What do you mean? I was thinking about the value you can bring to me. I thought we could be allies, but now it seems that you can only be a lackey at best. Riang walked up to Ivan Vanki and reached out to grab the reactor on the iron frame on his chest shell. Even with a high temperature of hundreds of degrees, given the huge energy in Riang's body, he couldn't feel hot even with this amount of heat. Click. Squeeze it hard with your hands, and the reactor shell instantly turns into a pile of powder. Your technology is more than an era behind Tony Stark. I thought you could help me, but now I'm just humiliating you. You're worthless. Riang's words penetrated deeply into Ivan Vanki's heart. He directly used lightning and violence to explain his ability, an energy system more powerful than a reactor. Ivan Vanki was so shocked by Riang's ability that he could not speak. What are you going to do? You can no longer provide me with any help, you are worthless. Riang did not find what he wanted from Ivan Vanki. Although Ivan Vanki's drawings were complicated, Riang's super speed memory ability was not difficult to understand, although it would be difficult for Jean to achieve this level of design. But judging from the expected usage efficiency and energy supply level marked below, this cannot be compared with Iron Man at all. It is conceivable that if he had not appeared, Ivan Vanki would have used such a thing to fight against Tony Stark's reactor armor. Before taking into account the restraint of the electric whip on the metal body, Ivan Vanki would have been completely destroyed. Abuse. So, Riang turned around and was about to leave. He came with joy but returned with disappointment. To be honest, Riang has not made any achievements in physics. It is impossible for him to improve the design of the arc reactor by himself, so subsequent plans will become very troublesome. Boom! Lightning was released from Riang's body again, and he turned around to leave. But suddenly he heard a hint of sincerity from Ivan Vanki behind him. I can do better. Yeah, Riang suddenly turned around. What did you say? I can do better, but you have to tell me why you are here. I want revenge on someone. You have the power and I have the skills. Ivan Vanki saw how powerful Zhang was, but because of this, even if he was humiliated, he had to stay. The adult world is not a fairy tale, and interests are the paths opened up for the strong. Ivan Vanki was belittled by Zhang, but he still had to stay. And it was precisely because of this that he saw the strength of the other party. Joining hands with the strong can make you stronger. This is an unchanging truth. Why should I believe you? Riang suddenly appeared opposite Ivan Vanki again. A distance of 10 meters is less than the blink of an eye, and even exceeds the stress response of a human facial muscle beating. Because you have hatred and I see it, Ivan Vanko said. A person who seeks revenge is also full of analogies to people who have such thoughts. When Jaeon said Tony Stark's name, Ivan Vanko felt Jaeon's hatred for Tony Stark. We can join forces, Ivan Vanko said again. But I said, you are only worthy of being a dog. What will you give me in exchange for my trust? Jung actually had a little interest in this guy again, but what he lacked now was a reason to convince him. What's the fate of Tony Stark? A hint of ferocity appeared on the corner of Ivan Vanki's mouth. But first, they need to solve the immediate problem. While Jung and Ivan Vanko were confronting or negotiating in the hut, explosions from outside the house ignited the commotion in the stalemate. The choking smoke bombs were accompanied by flames that instantly spewed out of the thick fog and smoke. It was obvious that it was a surprise attack with gunshots. Ta 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 ta. Judging from the sound, these thermal weapons were not equipped with silencers, which meant that the raiders did not consider that the attack would have a greater impact on the surrounding environment. And to further judge, who can carry out such an attack in a busy city without any worries? Who can be found in the land of Russia? Is the gang killer still someone Ivan Vanki once offended? You're not an American. Who have you offended before? Jung led Ivan Vanko quickly through the gunfire. The speed force began to separate from Zhang's body to Ivan Vanki's body as the body came into contact. After the speed of more than 1,000 kilometers per hour was halved by the two, it still had an momentum of more than 500, but for an assault rifle with a rate of fire exceeding 600, this is not enough. At the moment when the smoke screen was generated, Riang had already completed the maneuvers and reversals, instantly killing two of the opponents in the crowd. It was not difficult to find out that the opponent was Russian after taking off his combat helmet, but at the same time, Riang did not have time to make any further judgments. The number of people in the raid of a group of teams exceeded 5, but the 3 survivors did not react to the fall of their companions from the instant killing by Riang. The intensive gunfire had just sounded. Riang could not let Ivan Vanki die for the time being. He must take this burden and escape. The speed of more than 500 compared to about 600 per hour. The similar movement speed prevents Zhang from becoming embarrassed. But the most important thing now is to find out the identity of this group of people. Fortunately, the sharing of the speed force can also make Ivan Vanki temporarily has this power. Oh my god, what did you do? Ivan Vanki seemed to ignore the pain on his body. He looked at the lightning surrounding him in surprise. In fact, with the addition of the speed force, Ivan Vanki also temporarily possesses super recovery capabilities, which allows his burns and nerve paralysis injuries to begin to heal quickly. But now is not the time to think about these things and express surprise. I'm asking you, idiot. Who have you offended? Why would someone come after you? They are Russians. Zhang was angry. He found Ivan Vanko to help him avenge Tony Stark, not to let himself go. Get involved in another incident. He often avoided surveillance in New York. Although it turned out that this was useless, Jaeon still did a good job. Now a group of guys of unknown origin surrounded Ivan Vanko's lair. From the window, you can see that there are several military trucks parked just downstairs of this pub. At least 2 groups of people are surrounding us. Let's figure out who would pay such a high price to kill you. Why don't you say that this is the helper called by Tony Stark? In order to silence you or mine, I have countless enemies. Who the hell remembers this? Ivan Vanki felt like he was in a daze after reacting in an instant. Too big. Leave here first before thinking more. Maybe you are here for the Ark, which is the same as your purpose. You are not the only smart person in this world. Everyone wants to get the Ark reactor, and it will not be exclusive to the Stark family. After holding it in for a long time, although Riang couldn't stand this fool yelling in front of him, it seemed like there was nothing wrong when he thought about it. Although Jaeon disdains Ivan Vanko's crude reactor, what if it were replaced by someone else? Hold on tight if you get thrown out while I'm running. Zhang's actions and subsequent words proved that he recognized Ivan Vanki's words. The identity of the attacker was tentatively determined. They could try to cooperate first. A safe dialogue environment was what both parties needed. But Riang's words didn't make any sense. Maybe he forgot to turn on the vibrating voice at this moment, or maybe Ivan Vanki was able to see the full extent of Riang at the same speed without the fear caused by countless unknowns. Aang's head start effect has faded. I only heard Ivan Vanki suddenly interjecting, I can fly out, right? At least at a speed of more than 450 kilometers per hour. That's an AK series rifle. It's not difficult to tell by looking at its shape, but now you can actually take me and run out with this. Things have the same speed as bullets. You are the god of speed, right? Oh my god. For a long time, Riang, who was ready to beat up this fool, suddenly found that he had no way to do it. No one would retaliate maliciously to someone who flatters him. Ivan Vanki is not bad at analysis and logic. What he lacks is opportunity and a calm heart. Impetuousness and eagerness for quick success are often the root causes of Ivan Vanki's wrong choices and mistakes, but what Riang must admit is that, this guy has a good mind and is quite smart. You're a smart guy, but I hate talking to smart people. After Riang finished speaking, he stopped talking and saw his legs sinking down, clasping the hooks of his feet deeply into the ground. Boom! Lightning bursts out. This is the first time that Riang has accelerated to such a degree since his failed upgrade experiment. Although the last material upgrade experiment failed, Riang still chooses to use energy storage to repeatedly speed up his power. Although the damage to the suit is huge, it can still reach the current fastest speed of 1500 kilometers in the shortest time. Divided into 2 parts, it also exceeds the upper limit of the bullet rate of fire of the opponent's weapon. It is more than enough for Riang to take Ivanenko away from here. Half a minute later. Da da da. Da da. The gunfire that gradually stopped disappeared as the smoke screen dispersed. No one could see clearly what happened in the smoke screen. These Russian raiders just saw a burst of golden lightning passing by, and then they could no longer see anything else. Report, no one in the room. An attacker used a walkie-talkie to report the situation to a military vehicle outside the tavern. This time the vanguard team lost 3 people, but they found nothing. The target escaped and no remaining records were found during the search. There was only a long silence on the other end of the intercom, as if he was thinking, or trying to make a reasonable judgment on the matter. After a while, the voice finally sounded. Record the imaging and thermal sensing devices in the retrieval device. After cleaning the battlefield, return to the base immediately and stand by. Clear. Busy. This group of attackers of unknown origin began to search for the place where Ivanenko once lived, hoping to find some useful information here. But, except for a white-headed parrot that flew out of the window, there was nothing meaningful to them in the room, including the pile of reactor debris that was completely crushed by Jaeon. Under the tavern floor, darkness and blood have become the only mainstream here at this moment. All the drinkers and streetwalkers who had stopped here lost their lives forever, shot to death between their brows or their hearts, and no one was allowed to leave this place alive. After this unknown attacker completed their search, a fire destroyed everything here. In the surrounding area, the fences and road closure railings have not yet been removed, but tomorrow's Moscow news will definitely show that a fire broke out in this pub, and none of the drinkers inside survived. Perhaps some netizens will come forward to express doubts about this. But over time everything will be covered up, as if it never happened. Where do they come from? What is their purpose? What are their identities? No one knows. All that can be seen is that the officer who got on the bus last had a tattoo of a 9-headed skull on his wrist. That's their name. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.